Okay, it is 2:40. So in the interest of staying on track and on time here, good afternoon, everybody. Let's see, you are in the main Zoom room, which is one of 4 breakout rooms. This Zoom room is featuring Reggie Blanding, a librarian at the Newark Public Library. And our discussion, he'll be moderating discussion about socioeconomic factors. Before we kick that off, we'll just do a little bit of housekeeping here. I'm going to try to paste the Padlet link in. Hopefully that went through. And if I would ask for someone to please, if we haven't already chosen a scribe for this, if someone would, it doesn't even necessarily have to be one person, and I might try to drop some things in from the conversation. So the idea is if you're able to multitask and you have that capability on your computer to go into the Padlet to capture ideas or to, and you know, feel free to do that. So, and I believe that's it. I already introduced Reggie, so I'm going to let you take it over. I'll be here for tech help and for moral support.
Very, very much needed moral support. Thank you. Appreciate it, Ralph. Yeah, so yes, Reggie in the James Brown African American Room at Newark Public Library. And as Ralph mentioned, the Padlet is in the chat. And I think we may have a scribe for that, but also anyone, anything comes to mind during the discussion that anyone might want to add, you can definitely add that as well. So everyone has access to that. Just a few other things just to encourage anyone who might want to do so to just add their pronouns to their names in case we wound up in conversation. Also, I'd like to remind anyone who is not speaking just to make sure you mute your mics while doing so. And, anyone who, you can use the reaction button as well, just to raise your hand or, feel free to wave your hands wildly in front of the camera or stare intensely into it. That may work as well, but maybe not as well as the reaction button with the raise hand for anyone who chooses to do so. Although the latter two will be way more entertaining, so feel free to do that as well. So I'm trying to think where to start today because just socioeconomic factors encompass so much and things I find myself ingrained in after 15 years in the library field. Even just within this time here, this session, just a few things I've heard today where I've been like, that's something I've never thought of. So it feels like the culture is just so much different in every branch you go into, any community you go into, all those needs. So I'd say from a general starting point, because again, I've had a hard time just thinking what's the first opening question I'd want to do for this, but just what are some needs, particularly that you've seen in your own branches? Anybody who wants to jump into this that you that have brought you here, that have just invested you in this discussion, or things that you may not have known about before you worked in a library, where you're just like, oh wow, this is something that we fully need to address. So just needs in general that have spoken to you and just brought you into these sessions. So just anyone who wants to jump in.
I'm happy to jump in. One of the things that's different for me in this community that I'm serving now in Burlington County is we don't have any homeless shelters here. So in New Brunswick, a lot of the customers that we served there were homeless, or people experiencing homelessness, people leaving the prison system. And So I was very aware of services for people experiencing homelessness here in Burlington County. It's all about rehousing and rapid rehousing. And in my mind, I am now making a distinction between those two branches of service that I hadn't ever considered before. And not to throw Burlington County under the bus, but the rehousing effort has a lot of energy and input, and the services for people experiencing homelessness are really they don't have the same. And everybody's got a different service area, but it was really a shock to me to come here and come across that.
Yeah, that, thank you, Rosie. Just a side note before that, anyone else who may have questions, I'll keep an eye on the chat as well, or just comments, anything like that, and try to follow that way as well and add those to the discussion. But yeah, me and you, it's, the same. When I started my career in Denver at the Blair Caldwell African American Research Library there, in a historic community of 5 Points, Denver. And, the first thing I learned going into the field was first question I probably got was, how do I get housing? Can you direct me to this social service? And, 15 years later, of course, even post-pandemic, it seems like it hasn't gone in the direction, following the climate, that now it seems like it's progressed as opposed to getting better. So that's, definitely something I've seen in several the branches that I've worked in different spaces and communities. So, and then does anyone else, have that? Is that something where you've sort of seen like roadblocks or any advancements, things that you're doing in your libraries to address that? I heard a keyboard click, but
sorry, were you gonna say something? Sorry. I'm sorry. I thought it was the chat coming up, but I had the live transcript because I wanted to see what was already said. And I was like, oh, people are typing away. At our library, we try and work, in tandem with Human Services Department. We have had social work interns from Rutgers, but without that much success, because I think that it's a great program, but for us, what would have been helpful is to have somebody who is able to actually sit down and connect people to services at hours that the Human Services Department isn't open. And often with the interns, they could only come at, for an hour in the middle of a Tuesday, which wasn't necessarily helpful for our people. But we also are finding it challenging that most of the services are not in Princeton that would be helpful for people. So while libraries are able to provide safe space, water, bathrooms that are all secure in terms of somebody needing to take a shower or have a place to keep their things, I'd really love to learn how we are making other libraries are trying to find ways to be even more friendly. I mean, a lot of what we're doing is making sure that we know everybody's names so that we can say hi, good morning, and greet people if they seem to want to be greeted, which also makes other patrons feel more comfortable. I don't know, but I'd love to learn what other people are doing.
Yeah, and thank you for mentioning. Yes, thank you for all those points, but also thank you for mentioning the social worker. That is something I've wondered about in, again, within the 15 years that I've worked in the field with a minor gap for about 3 years. I've been in one library that's actually had a full-time social worker, which is the current library I'm at now, Newark Public Library. And I see ours in the room currently, but I think that does make a world of difference, just having someone there, much longer term or on a much more regular basis. We've had situations with interns or people who've come in, and we might have someone who's there one day a week, and if they don't make it that day, you've got understandably very frustrated patrons. And I do wonder, because I've only seen this in Newark, but are there other libraries, anyone here who works at libraries that has a social worker on site who works, someone available full time, or even internships and how that's working?
So I don't have any input about social workers, unfortunately, but I will jump in and say, so Rosie and I we started our careers almost together at New Brunswick. And we, as Rosie mentioned, we did have a lot of experience working with patrons who are experiencing homelessness. And then I moved into working in schools. And I think one thing that was really surprising for me was that often I would hear from our administrators that these students, these students they're homeless right now, or they're experiencing homelessness right now. And it did not fit my mental image of what that means. And so when I would think of someone who's experiencing homelessness, it was like this person who doesn't have a place to sleep and is on the street and is coming into the library to get warm and that kind of thing. And what I was discovering a lot, I was learning that a lot of our students were living night to night in a motel, or couch surfing with friends, or staying with this family member and this family member and bouncing around. And that all falls under sort of that idea of families or people who are experiencing homelessness. And, in the schools, it's a little easier, right? Because you get that information, because we keep track of the kids and their addresses and who we're in touch with and stuff. And so it's much easier to find out if our students and their families are experiencing these things. You might never know otherwise, right? Because they are staying somewhere where they might have access to laundry, or they might, and it's not as apparent. But, I would put out there for this discussion that we, as librarians, even in the public libraries, should keep that in mind, because you may be having a lot of families, students, patrons, whoever, who are coming in, and you may not realize that they're experiencing this state of sort of, just because they have somewhere to sleep doesn't mean they have a home. That's a very different situation. And so if you can start that outreach and let people know that you have services, there are services available, even if you're not sleeping on the street, or even if you're not in the shelter, kind of thing. I think that's really important and powerful, because I would guess that that's perhaps in some communities an even larger portion of the population than your traditional mental image of what someone experiencing homelessness looks like.
If I could add to that, so a phrase that I learned recently is wraparound services, and I'm not sure how familiar everybody is with that, but there's specifically an organization in Burlington County that offers rental assistance, daycare assistance, energy bill assistance. They are essentially available to help people navigate any kind of financial assistance that they need to thrive. So that there isn't a situation where they can't pay the bills for a few months and then they are out of their home, and then they have to use rapid rehousing, or then ultimately end up without a home at all. But wraparound services is a new phrase for me, and I really appreciate knowing about this approach, because essentially means like we're creating a network so that you don't fall, like, okay, we can get you a job, but if you don't have a car or a way to get to your job, there's no point. And or we can get you a place to sleep, but if you don't have a job to go to keep making money so that after the 3 months is up, you can keep paying for where you're staying. So just putting that out there, and I will promote, again, outreach, like I said earlier, this organization that I am now partnering with, I never knew that they did all this until I started going out to the community asking questions. But it's not like the perfect answer, but it's still good to know that these services exist.
Actually, yeah, thank you both. And no, that is good, because of course, and I sometimes question what I'm doing. I know there are services in the community here, and it's have I reached out to them? Have I tried to facilitate something, within our branch with these, with these services? And I think that's definitely very important to have that, because, we, in a lot of cases, I guess we are the front line. Everyone says go to the library, and I'm noticing that and feeling that more so now, even in light of the pandemic, particularly with job services. And, of course, another part of this, the digital divide, or whatever various terms there are. And it seems like even more so, there are more people being asked to, just get on your smartphone and, scan this and send it in, as opposed to having that in-person help. And, same with various social services. And I mean, it's just been as heavy as I've ever seen it, in light of everything going on. So I am curious if anybody else has experienced that sort of an uptick in, how your libraries, or how you've dealt with it, or just anything you could add to that. Also, I should say, if you want to, if there's any gripes you have, and you don't want to say, you can always say my friend's library. Feel free to just let it all out. Just say someone I know in another state. But yeah, just any.
Hey everyone. Sorry to interrupt. But yeah,
no.
I'd like to chime in just a little bit. Stop me if you've heard this before. I work at the New Brunswick Library, and let's see. I'm just collecting my thoughts a little bit. But before the pandemic hit, and I feel like the pandemic has really affected our services to a big extent. We had a social work student here, someone who usually would study at Rutgers, and they would update what public resources were available, and they would help our patrons find them. Like, they would sit at a table that would basically be reserved for them with a laptop, and they would help patrons connect to what resources were available. Of course, the pandemic hit. We don't have as much foot traffic anymore. We don't have as much, we don't even have a social worker right now. So that position is kind of vacant right now. In general, I do think our library can do better, since we are on the front line. And there you go. Yeah, I think our library can do better. I've advocated for, public phone use, free folders, more like extra computer turns, even when even when our little policy or procedures don't really support it. And what else was I going to say? Oh, we do have career services. That is ongoing. We do have staff who basically have two jobs, the regular library assistants type of job, and then the second one where they come in with a laptop and help people to resumes, practice job interviews, fill out applications, which is always really tedious and time consuming, especially to people who don't really know how to use a computer that well. Yeah, but overall, I think our library can do better. I'm sure I'm not the only one who thinks so.
That's great. Yeah, thank you, Marco. And yes, the phone situation is definitely a conversation I've had even just in this previous week. I'd say definitely in our branch, that's always a big thing is, I need a phone or do we have a public phone that could be utilized? And hopefully part of an ongoing discussion that gets somewhere, but that's, it's just, there's things that you sort of sometimes take for granted on the other side that, a whole population of people will highlight and, say, okay, this is like an essential need to someone. And, even as you mentioned with the sort of disconnect with online services, people, just something that one person might consider as simple as an email is just like a whole nother hurdle for someone else. So, and that's, I guess that's another thing I'm wondering about as far as like for that, you know, handling that digital divide or that disconnect. If there are people, you know, even in light of COVID, I know some places aren't having as much going on as far as in-person services, but I am curious if there are people helping out and doing, or, you know, libraries that have classes resuming or have adapted. And I mean, I guess I could say online, but then again, it's still a whole question of reaching out to people who need to learn to access online services. But is there any, you know, courses resuming within the branches where, you know, we're assisting people who may need that help?
I had a question. Let me lower my hand. I'm wondering if, you know, public libraries used as, you know, frontline, sort of like a Band-Aid to a lot of social services. And I'm wondering if anyone's experiencing like budget cuts. Like, we're expected to be sort of everything to everybody. Like, we're a warming center, we're a cooling center, we provide free internet, we do ESL classes for free, we do all of these things, but then at the same time, a lot of our stakeholders are like, oh, well, you should be able to do it with the minimum funding. And it's like, is anyone else experiencing this, or is it like, yes, my friend's library is
Jessica, I don't think that has ever not been the case of libraries.
Yeah, it's very disheartening that we're just constantly being asked to do more with less, and the expectations we're going to keep doing it. And like, I don't know what the answer is for that, but like, you know, like it feels like we're just like this sort of stopgap place for everything that's been cut in other sectors. And we're just supposed to like smile and be happy about it. I don't know. Not happy about it. Like, I'm happy to do it, but I'm not happy about not having the money and the resources to do everything we're asked to do.
Yes, I think it's interesting that you say that, because even though I'm not obviously on the ground anymore, I'm at Library Link now, we're just kind of taking a look at our most recent grant applications and kind of pulling some takeaways. And a lot of the takeaways seem to be that a lot of the libraries are now serving as like sort of emergency response centers and emergency relief locations, and people are asking for funding to do things like you know, keep the power on when the power goes out in the community, so people can come and charge their devices because they need those devices to, you know, file the paperwork to respond to the emergency and all of these other things. And I saw someone in the chat said Wi-Fi outside of the building. Like, that was another takeaway, that we saw a lot of people wanting to expand their Wi-Fi so people can access it 24/7, even when the library is not open or the staff is not there. And I think you're right. It seems like, although that's always been the case, it does seem like there are even more demands, you know, in the wake of maybe the pandemic and a lot of recent weather events and things like that, that the expectation is that the library will respond, but the library isn't always in a position to do so, right? And there's not more funding to respond, as far as I can tell. So I think you're right, making those stakeholders aware of the fact that those seem to be the growing expectations is going to be really important.
I think it's funny because you said grants. Like, I feel like there's a lot of grants this year. We've been super fortunate to benefit from a lot of them, and I think for a while I was dazzled by that. You know, this grant funding is helping us implement all these programs, and now we're looking at hiring people for these grants, and I am now facing the fact that we're going to hire people who we may not be able to continue to keep on our staff when the grant is up, and that's, I feel like I have to be really transparent about that with people when they apply. But it's a new landscape for me personally, but the grants are they're a great Band-Aid. It's another Band-Aid, but absolutely when if the grants keep supplementing what we're doing, will that just keep us quiet enough and not, you know, will the stakeholders not hear about it as much? Not to say that I don't want the grants.
I remember I took a class through Rutgers online, and the professor, it was actually a school library class, saying that we shouldn't apply for grants for basic services. It should be something extra, because then if you apply for a grant that's a basic service, you're saying that you don't really need to be funding this for us. I mean, I think that's hard. If you need to, if there's a real need, it's hard, but I thought there was a lot of wisdom in that statement.
That's great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for all those points. And it's a lot to unpack, and I'm definitely thinking of the Jessica, I think, just mentioning how, we are sort of on the front lines of all this. And, part of the thing I've also thought about is lately is, and maybe this is in various branches, who can communicate these, because it's to me, I always think of it as a societal, we deal with that part of it, but, how much are branches getting that message out to, people they talk to in the city, the city officials, and, are they hitting that point home? This is what we're dealing with. This is what we're addressing daily. So that's something I've thought about a lot lately. That's, and although, actually, I'm sorry, let me jump to, I do see a couple good comments that I did want to kind of spotlight in the chat. So Elizabeth did mention that they've gone fine free, which I think a lot of libraries, I know we have, and quite a few libraries have done so. And there are libraries that allow copies faxing and scanning for free, which is great. Actually, scanning, like I said, scanning has become very big. And I think at this point, I feel like every public area at this point should have one available. I think it's almost daily that we have someone who asks if we can scan something for them to add to a job application online. And then Heather mentioned resume and job application printing is free at our branch. So yeah, things like that. And I don't know if there's, if that's something that's becoming more widely, if that's something that's changed during this time, or, if that's, if people are adapting and starting to do that more regularly, if that's, I think that's something new for us. All right, and then other than that, so I think we, I don't know if we addressed that earlier, the training basically, outside of, just doing classes and, I don't remember if we mentioned that or if we got to that earlier, if anyone was actually doing classes for people who, to sort of, get them used to adapting to this online, what's now basically becoming an increasingly reliance on like online knowledge or services. I would say at branch,
we aren't yet able to have any public programs in our buildings yet. The county hasn't allowed us to do that yet, but one-on-one, if somebody just drops in, we do help them. And so that's kind of how we've been approaching it at this point, because until we can have many people, or not even many, but just even a small group in a room together, if somebody comes in and needs help, or if they call in and they say, I really need help, then we'll do sort of like a one-on-one time with them. So that way we're not really turning them away, because we have noticed there are people definitely that are struggling more now. And we're in a sort of a more rural situation. So the people that stayed in our library all day, if they didn't have a home, or they didn't have good housing security, we actually aren't sure where they went, some of them, and we don't know how to get them back, because we don't know if they know the library's open. So that's been kind of a concern of ours. We hope that they found someplace safe to go when we were closed, and we're doing our best to let the community know we're open again for them to come back inside. But that's kind of a concern that most of our staff have, is where the regular people that we knew relied on us went. And we really hope that they found some place to be during this time.
Yeah, and yeah, thank you. Thank you for, and also for mentioning, just for saying rural. I think I tossed my notes aside, but that, for me, I've worked in, I've been lucky to do sort of pro Libra work in different areas, but my primary long-term work has been in urban centered libraries. And yeah, this is a problem across the board. It's so many different spaces that maybe people don't generally associate with these issues. And that's, another layer to it. And actually, let me see. I'm sorry, there's a question here in the chat. I missed a couple. Just a second, let me scan back up here. Okay, so from, so Dave asked, do you think that municipality governing social service moving to more technology-driven, non-human mitigated service models has caused these institutions who still provide in-person services to find themselves facing more and more service needs?
I definitely say yes to that. We have a lot of people that come in now and need help filing all kinds of forms, and they, will try to refer them to one of the local agencies, and they'll say they're never open, they don't answer the phone, or there's no one there to help me. And so we end up spending the time with them to make sure that they can access whatever forms or filing those forms. Because in many cases, they don't have internet at home. So, whatever help we can give them is what they're going to get when we're here. And once they leave, they're not going to get that help again until they come back. So it definitely, that's taking up a big chunk of time.
In our county, the social services buildings have either only just opened their doors or and they're appointment only, or they haven't yet opened their doors. And we're right nearby them, but it is really, I was in a call, it was Coalition for the Homeless meeting. It was a virtual meeting. And so all these organizations were attending the meeting, talking about their different programs and how many clients they've served. And there was a citizen on the call who had to call while she was working. You could hear that she was at work, and she was just calling to get an idea of what services were available right now. And because she was on the phone too, she wasn't seeing anything in the chat because she was calling in. She had to stop everyone and ask them to spell out, when can you pick up a box of food and what time can I go and apply for rental assistance? And it really surprised me, that we are all open in more of a capacity than a lot of these social services buildings are. And I think that somebody said that the Department of Labor is who a lot of people are looking at to determine when they open their doors. But that might have something to do with this huge shift, as we are, like Heather said, we're open and everybody else is not.
I'm also wondering if libraries have a real customer service baked into what we do. That's a huge part of our continuing education, is how do you speak to people, and how do you provide excellent superlative service to everybody, whereas other governmental agencies may not have that customer service focus. It's more delivering of this is what you do, go away now. It's I feel like I've had that happen, where you go to just personally, and you mentally think, oh, that was no wonder people are coming to the library, because we're when I'm training staff or I've been trained, it's make sure that you speak kindly, make sure if they're presenting this way, it might not have anything to do with you, so maintain your patience, all of these trauma informed service. So I'm sure we're not the only one, but we're one of, like, I feel like it's a place where people trust and we're helpful. Like I feel like I want to get on the bandwagon, the soapbox, and just tell everybody how great we are so they can give us more money.
Indeed, absolutely. Thank you. And yeah, thank you all. And another answer to Dave's question, one of my colleagues, Alicia, she says, yes, she's helped patrons check the status of stimulus checks online and other things like Social Security and disability services. And, you know, I mean, just things even as simple as just going in for a license or, you know, upgrading a license. Everything is just so backed up right now, which has just increased the pressure. And I've told people in Newark, you can probably get a license or a schedule next week if you can make it down to Ocean City, you know, which is like one of the few. So it's just sort of been this big domino effect that we're on the front line of and seeing exactly how, you know, how much everything has been backed up. And that's, you know, I just wonder if that is being communicated or how, or if it's being communicated enough, if people think that might be, you know, if there's communication between the libraries or these spaces with the city to say, hey, you know, this is, we have people who are in dire need right now and, you know, we're seeing it, but we, you know, is there a way, even if it means we have these places open, operating on a slower level, you know, they're operating at least to sort of take some of the pressure and hopefully, you know, balance out as much as possible. So, but yeah, thank you all for, and that's the other, I mean, I guess what ideals or, you know, I guess in other libraries, you know, whether in the chat or on camera, what are some needs or some ways you would see forward that would help alleviate some of the stress or some of the, you know, the issues. I know we've mentioned just things like phones, you know, but even beyond that, policies.
You know, one thing I think, and I realize it's hard, but you know, Jessica's sort of comments, I think, bring to mind something that's been happening everywhere, not just in New Jersey, but there was a gutting of reference services. And there was a period, you know, I may be a little older, but I remember when you had this whole reference department, it was just full of information librarians. You know, they were professional information people. And you look around at libraries today, you rarely see any information librarians. You might see some readers advisory librarians, you might see, but it's a really interesting question. I think that's part of where we come into this crux of, you know, it's one thing to be truly great at readers advisory, and there's some really good readers advisory who will be really good reference librarians, but that's a big lift to really be good at all the stuff that's coming out in books and also be good at all the stuff you need to know in information. And I think long-term, we're going to have to revisit the idea of professional information departments, and that's funding. I realize that. But if other parts of the municipal framework are not going to step up, if they're going to continually say, we're not going to hire people to do this work, then I think the message has got to be, well, we can do it, but you really have to reinstate, however you want to call them, information departments, reference departments. I know that's kind of a thing, but that's what I think we're living through, kind of the problem a little bit with, that could really be helpful in what we bring to the table.
Absolutely, thank you, Dave. Yeah, that's big. We need to, I think, focus on people who can, you know, getting people in the experienced people in those areas who can address, especially now, address those needs. And someone mentioned, I think it was I can't remember, it was an earlier talk, but someone had mentioned just also sort of making sure the people that are higher up in the organization, board members, other people are you know, having these issues addressed to them, you know, that we sort of make sure we communicate these issues and have them communicate them as well, you know, and advocate along those lines. And, you know, just whether it's attending board meetings or, you know, just reaching out personally and saying, I've noticed this and I've brought this to the forefront several times. You know, I wanted to know just where we are on it. And it feels like sometimes maybe you just have to, I don't want to say be annoying, but, you know, be consistent, you know. And I know I've seen, you know, I know now particular just, you know, needs that we've had. And I know right now at our library, we've been talking about just having training across the board for dealing with our patrons experiencing homelessness, and to sort of just, you know, advocate on how we interact and assist and help. And I, you know, I think that's, you know, it's something I don't think we had during my first year there, because last year barely counts. But that's, you know, just one of those little measures of progress, which hopefully, you know, is followed up on and continued. But I think it just also just needs to be a measure of consistency in going forward, not just here's this thing we just did and hope for the best, but follow up. And Misan says we have 5 minutes left for the session. I see another comment. I do want to read, make sure I get that. So Perpetual from Selwa, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, Selwa. And she says, say a perpetual challenge is that some of the people who need help do not realize they can get it at the library. I've been wanting to partner with organizations and religious institutions where people go to get the word out. So how do other libraries do this? And great question. So we got time to address that.
I've tried to answer Sal, but I sent a direct message to Jessica because I'm terrible at using chat. So I'm just going to say it out loud. We have a lot of, like the Burlington County Coalition for the Homeless, a lot of organizational groups like that I try to get into and represent the library within. Inevitably, people are always really surprised at what we have to offer, but I found that to be the easiest way to meet a lot of organizational leaders and promote the library to them all at one time. Another example is there's a reentry task force for citizens who are reentering society after being part of the prison system. Sorry, my lingo is bad today. There's also a lot of youth-based organizational groups like that. So that's how we do it. I've only just started really doing this work, but so far I've been pretty successful. And if you have any organizational leaders at the top of your social services organizations, they can usually trickle you down to other groups within the organization.
And I will add, back in my days at New Brunswick, one thing I used to do a lot of, and this is counterintuitive to our advice to not keep applying for grants, but we used to often reach out to those organizations to partner with us for grant applications, and then we would write them. So it was kind of like a very natural partnership for them because, hey, all you have to do is agree to participate and you're going to get this extra funding. And then kind of once we do this one grant project, now you've worked with us. And so it was like a little bit of incentive for them, but then they got to know us and they would work with us, and then and now we have a partner. So that I mean, it is a shame to say that you have to like incentivize it, but I think sometimes you do. So if you can put something in there that they get out of it, sometimes I think that's really helpful.
That's great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you both. And yeah, absolutely. Reaching out to those local organizations and, you know, just kind of bolsters both, you know, the library and them for the services that all of us provide. So yeah, it's an ongoing discussion. And, you know, at this moment, though, I think we'll be closing out the room. So thank you all for my first moderated talk. Hopefully, you know, hopefully it wasn't too bumpy. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate y'all and appreciate all the yeah, feedback and I mean, just answers. And I think we are Thank you, Alicia.